and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is genuinely terrified that I'll spend the rest of the conversation speaking in baseball metaphors.
Tim Longo.
Yeah, sorry, man. Sorry to start you out with a curveball.
Oh, wow. I can't start this early with the AJ or whatever the acronym is. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, most of your metaphors will be lost on me. Because
I'm sure they will. Well, spring training is upon us, so we're all kicking the dirt out of our cleats and trying to get going.
It's on your mind then, right?
It is.
See, yeah. I'd have no idea that spring training would be starting. I guess spring makes sense, but
it's almost over. Yeah.
Oh, it's almost over. Oh.
Yeah, the opening day is like next week. It will be between this podcast dropping and the next podcast dropping. I think is the first is opening day.
So spring is short for baseball.
Spring actually starts in February for baseball because they all go and play in like Arizona and Florida. So.
Okay, because there's snow where you are, right? Or there was.
There is not snow where I am, but
okay.
my son has been playing baseball for a few weeks now. So,
well,
anyway,
here we go. Let's talk about some more.
Let's go ahead and throw out the first pitch, and hit some Link to the Past. So we are in our second episode here of Link to the Past, and a little confession from me. As you last time were talking about digging into Link Between Worlds a little bit.
Which I played more of, yeah.
Yeah, I have totally, gone whole hog into Spirit Tracks, which was that one DS game that I hadn't, DS Zelda game I hadn't finished.
Oh, yeah. Kind of in Wind Waker styles art.
Exactly, yeah. It's a cel-shaded 3D. I mean, it looks great on the DS. Kind of extraordinary, just from an engineering standpoint. You look at it and you're like, how did they do all this on a handheld?
I agree with that on Link Between Worlds too. There's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, no, they're pretty amazing how well they talk with the hardware. Maybe something we'll explore with these games. Whenever we talk about these older games, I think about the hardware they run on. And occasionally I'll see effects, even in Link to the Past, where I'm like, oh yeah, that's a SNES thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for listeners who haven't, you can track down our Super Metroid discussion, from last year, because I think in like the third episode or so of that, we specifically talk about the technical, the new technical stuff that the SNES could do, over the NES. In terms of full screen effects and sort of tilting the screen, things like that. Some things that you see actually in the map here are SNES enabled, etc.
And the layered backgrounds.
And the
term?
The parallax, yeah.
Yeah, the parallaxing, the Z buffering, whatever. Yeah, and in this section we played in Link to the Past, this last section, there are some nice moments of that when you get up in the mountains and stuff.
Yeah,
you see below. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So it's a, it's quite a series. I'm playing and seeing revisiting the same structure. Spirit Tracks is a little bit more constrained because you are literally on a train. So the overworld is all like stop based. Like it's all train tracks that you take from here to there, and you can only get off the train where there's a depot, where there's a stop. And so it's a little bit different from the other games in that way.
That seems weird.
Yeah, but it's also at the same time a little bit similar to Wind Waker, because you can really only get off at a temple or an island or whatever. It's not really that different, even though in Wind Waker you could travel anywhere on the ocean. You can't...
I think the perception of it was what felt...
Yeah. It does feel different, and I think that's a... I think that's a worthwhile place to sort of talk about one of your topics, which is the sort of the Zelda lens. This is a story. I mean, this is a franchise with just like this huge shadow. It's so early. It's like D&D. It's just one of those things that is so deeply ingrained both in in developer culture, but also just game culture. It casts such a long shadow because it goes back all the way to the NES. There's only really one open world adventure game before the original Zelda, which would be the Atari 2600 adventure. And that's got its own. That's got a big key that you carry around too. So there's definitely some interesting similarities there. But technical limitations of the Atari 2600 make a lot of that. And I've played that in emulation, and it's a game that's very difficult to appreciate today. Even though I think a lot of its structure is actually fundamentally kind of similar.
Yeah, it's a dungeon. It's essentially a dungeon portion of the. That game probably one of the bigger influences on me in general. I played that on the 2600 at the time.
Wow, man, you're old.
I am. Yeah, I still have it in my basement.
Do you?
Yeah. Wow. I was telling Brett in pre-show. I'm struggling more so than maybe even Metroid, and I think I talked about this in the Metroid series, that sort of these two franchises are neck and neck for me for Nintendo franchises. But I think Zelda edges Metroid out a bit, just because I tend to not be great at platforming type action games, and I think that's where I struggle with the Metroid games. But I'm having a hard time kind of going through and being analytical about this game because of that shadow that Brett's talking about. And I just kind of asked him that question in pre-show. So how much is that lens? I think you put it well, influencing, your ability to kind of see this as a fresh game, with fresh analytical eyes, because there's something about its DNA that is just unavoidable. I think I'm being hyperbolic when I say this, but there is some truth to it. It's semi-daily for me in my daily life, where something, and especially now more than ever because of Breath of the Wild, but even before Breath of the Wild, there's so many vocabulary words that we get from these games, and structural things, and order of operations and mechanics, and onboarding, and the iterations that, and I think it is hard to go back and play the first one at this point, but I think we did pick the right retro Zelda to play, because this one is so honed and pure in its its flow. I'm really impressed, and this is, like I said before, this is one I actually missed for the old days, so I'm glad we're playing it, because I missed out on it, but it's been hard.
I think DNA is a good term. I sort of I think of it as it's like you look around, and most animals have bilateral symmetry, or whatever, and it's literally a DNA thing that so much of this game and the other couple in the franchise, especially the first one, are reflected in games today in such a deep way. It's the underlying structure of so much.
Yeah.
That it really is hard to to step aside and sort of take a science fiction look of what if this wasn't, what if these weren't the seminal games? How we look, we just came off of playing Soul Reaver, and we were both commenting. Yeah, we were both commenting on that of we had no idea just how much how deeply influenced that was, by this game, by the probably these couple games, but mostly this game in particular, including the Dark World and some very specific mechanics.
The Dark World, and then I was making note that once you get the Master Sword in this section we played, you can then fire basically like a bolt from it if your hearts are at full, and if they fall below that, then you can no longer fire, and that's very much what happens, right, when you're at full life with the Soul Blade. What was it called? The
It was called the Wraith
Blade,
Blade, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then structurally, and the sense of now, actually, I'm thinking about this on the fly, and also the separate, the related topic that I want to talk about that actually brought this question of that we're talking about now of how has Zelda's legacy really, how embedded is it in our sort of game developer psyche, but the notion of having to actually discover and search for things and not holding your hand to find them, whether it be a dungeon or a shrine or something like that, right? And that actually came to my mind as we were playing this, because I haven't played Breath of the Wild yet, but I'm hearing so many people on podcasts and at work talking about it. And one of the interesting innovations that people are talking about, which is sort of an oxymoron in a way, is that they don't, you go to the overworld map of Breath of the Wild and it doesn't show you where everything is that you can go collect, like, say, an Assassin's Creed or a modern day. And there isn't even a way to unearth that stuff by finding a map, or you actually can mark stuff if you visibly see stuff on your map, but it doesn't hold your hand, and it makes you go and discover and find stuff. And therein, I think, making that discovery much more meaningful. And it's like this mini revelation to a lot of people playing, like, say, that and Horizon at the same time right now. And I'm looking back and as we're playing this, Link to the Past, and the same thing's happening. It's like, yeah, they've flashed some things on the map, which gives you a general direction, but you got to do it yourself. And Soul Reaver had the same thing, and it's frustrated me the whole time with Soul Reaver and with Zelda. But I'm kind of just trying to reflect on why I give it a pass because of that, or is it's this tenet that obviously Nintendo has chosen to draw a line in the sand about, and they've stuck to it throughout all the Zelda games. I guess there is a quest log in Breath of the Wild, but it's still not your typical one. And why would they shirk that modernization? And there seems to be a good reason, because that part of the gameplay and part of the discovery is actually the point of this franchise. I don't know. It's been hard. Like, as you can see, I'm searching for ways to talk about it, because it's been hard for me to really separate my analytical mind with, I guess, my nostalgic mind, and it's a Zelda game. And I think that's probably a lot of how Breath of the Wild is being received as well, right? Because people describe it as the Zelda game that they've always wanted, but in that statement, you're kind of playing your hand by saying it's a Zelda game. You know what I mean? Versus the game I always wanted.
Exactly.
There's a qualifier on there that is hard to escape.
And it's such a huge wedge of the the sort of gaming universe pie, I guess. That Zelda, like, put a stake in the ground and said, this is all, like, early on, just said, okay, everything from here on out, in this kind of area is derived from this. Yeah. In much the same way that Mario did. There's very few platformers, and to a degree, Super Metroid did. Although I think Castlevania, we say Metroidvania, right? So there's really two games that are kind of
contemporaries,
they're very kind of close together in time, and but these are huge swaths. This is like huge. These are continents, right? That have the first flag was planted, and they were all Nintendo games, and we identify certain features of them. I mean, there's a map, there's dungeons, there's a natural progression, and I think Breath of the Wild is maybe the one that's different in this way, and I'm not going to comment on it much because I haven't played it yet, but just from the sort of zeitgeist I'm hearing, there's a lot of sort of player skill enabling, or just a lot of variety in what and how you can approach things based on what you have. So you've got that. There's a natural storytelling that goes right along with that progression, which is the hero's journey that we've talked about a lot. It's definitely a specific legend. We had some feedback this time about this being legends that are told, literally from generation to generation, and they just change. It's like the 1001 Nights, that everybody tells the same stories, but not everybody tells them the same way.
Yeah.
That there's sort of like, oh, and then the hero did this thing and the hero did that thing.
And I appreciate that they have completely leaned into that throughout the history. And I was telling Brett there, and I'll do some research and try to find the book in the meantime, but hearing people talk about this new book that came out with Breath of the Wild, that's basically a lore compendium, and they have timelines and stuff in there, and they start describing how they all fit together. And I guess I'm probably going to get this wrong, so somebody will correct us, but I guess like Skyward Sword is actually now canonically the very first version of this story in this timeline or something weird like that.
Whoa.
And then
that's weird.
Yeah, so they've been kind of like messing with it enough recently where I guess they felt like they had to figure it all out. And there's a part of me that sort of like wanted them to just stick to their guns and say it's all just interpretations of one legend told from different people's perspectives.
That's a really weird thing to me. I mean, I would feel differently about it, I think, if literally one person was responsible. You look at like here we go. Game designer time to take a drink. But you look at Dark Souls, and that's all coming from the mind of one guy.
But someday it won't be.
No, well, maybe. I mean, maybe they won't make a Dark Souls 4. That would be kind of cool.
Well, I'm kind of talking about like 10 years from now or 5 years from now when they do a reboot or something. And somebody has to.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true, but at the same point, I sort of feel the same way about that. Is that I feel like, well, at that point, they've kind of let go of
I lost you.
It being this one thing that all integrates, and it literally is multiple interpretations. It's not all Miyamoto, and it's not, whatever. It's not one person. It's not all Miyazaki in the case of Dark Souls or Demon Souls. It's multiple impressions. Yeah, so I mean, you've got like one person kind of deeply invested in the early games, and then you're right. At some point, somebody else is going to take over.
Take it from me.
Exactly. In any given series, and have to put their own stamp on things. And that happened with Metroid 2. With early games that were all in-house at Nintendo, by whatever team. But then ultimately you had Metroid Prime series done at Retro, and then Other M was done by the people...
Ninja Theory.
Ninja Theory. You're right, yeah.
Ninja? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Ninja Theory. The people who do Ninja Gaiden. And who knows what Metroid will turn
Team
to
Ninja.
next.
Ninja Theory
Team Ninja. You're right. Team Ninja.
In England, yeah.
Yeah. So you have different people kind of taking it on and trying to get at the core of what things... And in fact, in the Zelda series, you've got even more hands. I mean, there's several Zelda games made. I actually went and looked at a ranking today. Yeah, Capcom was the one I was going to pick on, is that they did the Ages and Seasons games, which I didn't even realize.
Didn't they do Minish Cap as well?
They may have. Yeah. I don't know. There were some games that were made for the CDI that were, are not really considered part of the series and are the worst Zelda games out there. People don't think of them fondly. And then you have, I'm going to blow his name, but is it Aonuma? Who's shepherding it now? What is his name? It's like AG.
Yeah, I think you're close.
Yeah, I'm close.
I think he worked on, I think on Ocarina and...
It's Aonuma. Yeah, I was right. I mean, I'm not well versed in
we'll give it to you.
Japanese, but yeah, it's him anyway. I mean, we saw him at GDC a few years back.
Yeah.
Speaking about the series.
I think he worked on Ocarina and Majora's, but then took over for Twilight. Maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, because they did that thing where they switched it left-handed, right-handed versus, if you played it on the Wii or you played it on the GameCube, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the lore nerd in me just loves it when they kind of make it all fit. But in this particular case, I guess it's just weirding me out a bit that they're trying, because I liked. There's a side of me that wanted answers.
I'm totally different. I don't want it to. I don't care if it all fits. Like, I look at.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I think Bond. James Bond is a perfect example. Like, I'm perfectly happy to have a new Casino Royale.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That doesn't suck. And like the original Casino Royale.
I'm saying in this case, for me, and it's contrary to what I would normally want. For this case, I actually don't care. Like, I don't want it. I don't even want to think about this stuff. I just want it. I want each game to kind of, maybe in that Final Fantasy way, just be its own thing. So
it's interesting because Final Fantasy is an interesting example to bring up, because
which I'm not really qualified to talk about.
No, you're not. But I will say the things that are very similar, in those series are like the combat systems. Usually the combat is pretty similar from game to game. That's just a JRPG like genre thing. But a lot of the sort of trappings of the series, like airships and like a character named Sid or whatever, the chocobos, get a very different reimagining and have a very different feel from game to game. But because they're built on this same spine of, like, you're doing this JRPG stuff where you have a mage who casts Fira and Blizzaga and whatever, all
the their terminology. There's the crossover there.
Yeah, they just, all that stuff is very similar, and it's just a straight RPG kind of progression game where you're getting better and you're getting more skills, and those skills have the same names. And even though the setting is different, it's really just like similar systems applied to multiple kind of worlds to play them in. And this is kind of different in that the world is actually kind of fundamentally similar. But the things you're going to get, the sort of underlying new mechanic might be different. I mean, here we haven't really scratched the surface yet of the Dark World, because we only just kind of got to it this playthrough, that we're going to have to do this thing where we can switch back and forth. But there is often this kind of underlying different mechanic that is kind of interesting.
You mean in each Zelda game?
In each Zelda game, there's
usually a thing.
There's kind of a skeleton that it's hanging everything on, that it's its own thing, and
then there's usually one, like time for Ocarina, and there's usually this one thing that is its shtick for that game.
Yeah, with Majora's Mask, it's this 3-day thing, and you're reliving the same 3 days, because you can reset it, or in Ocarina, you can go back and forth in time with that particular temple where the sword is and all that stuff. And, here you've got this Dark World. I didn't play the original Legend of Zelda, so I don't know if there's a thing there.
See, that's the funny thing. There isn't in that case.
There may not.
It's more of the template. I don't think I'm forgetting something, but I think it's kind of more of the basic structure you're talking about when it comes to the world and the lock and key mechanisms of the different abilities and equipment items basically comes from that game, right? And then notoriously with 2, the sequel, they had some side-scrolling stuff and kind of, it's a divisive game, that one in particular, because they fooled with the formula much more so. But the first one is just that template, I'd say.
Well, and one thing that that I'm seeing, and I think it's a lot clearer, playing Spirit Tracks alongside this, one of the things that's very clear is the way in which your skills, these skills and objects that you sort of accrue over time, have to be done in a certain order, because later enemies and puzzles and
require. That's a good point.
They require. You need to have the panoply of stuff that you've built up over time in order to approach the next thing. So it's like building a ziggurat or something. Like, you've got this. This base or pyramid or whatever, you got this base that you're constantly building up, and you're kind of, getting higher and higher because you've got more and more stuff underneath you. And I think that the Zelda, the Breath of the Wild, from what I'm hearing, kind of is breaking with that a little bit because it kind of leans a little bit more on player skill, and using the tools that you have rather than requiring you to get a full toolbox before you take on the,
Well, and I think
challenge.
Yeah, we touched on this. It's hard because neither of us have played it, so it's hard to talk about it. But I know that, for instance, the stamina is similar to our conversation about Shadow of the Colossus.
Right.
Stamina is, it sounds like kind of the main gate because you get everything generally that you need early in the game from a mechanics perspective, but the only question at that point is, do you have enough stamina to do the thing you need to do? Because you have the key. It's just, can you know what I mean? Can you climb that cliff?
Can you actually make your way to the lock?
Yeah, because everything, swimming, gliding, climbing, it all takes stamina. So you build that up over time. And you can apparently get clever and kind of emergent about going around the systems to some degree by using food and stuff. But I don't know, it just sounds fascinating. So
yeah, no, it's really interesting because other open world games, I mean, picking on Skyrim, which I worked on, Skyrim has stamina, and it's a total side thing. Like, as a person playing, it's not a core mechanic to the game. It's there. It's like one of the three, I don't know, you've got health, mana, and stamina bars, I guess. And it feels like it should be equal to those other two things, but it really isn't. Because unless you're swinging a sword, I guess, or any other kind of melee weapon, the amount it takes out of your stamina is pretty minimal, and I guess running. So it's a limited thing, right? I mean, it's not kind of a front and center sort of thing. And part of that is making the game open to doing whatever you want to do. It's not a challenge game.
Yeah.
One of the things Todd Howard has said a lot about Elder Scrolls games is fun does not mean challenge necessarily. We should add kind of parenthetically, like some games are about challenging you and other games are more about expression in a way. And Elder Scrolls games as an open world game are more about expression. And then you take and you contrast that with like the more recent Far Cry's and the sort of Ubisoft open world style. So Assassin's Creed I throw in there as well. You get stuff as sort of a story progression, but there's just like this constant like overlaying on the world other stuff that you could do if you had this thing. Or even just wanted to spend the time in some cases. It's not even that you even need a thing. You just like you've learned about this thing and now you can go everywhere on the map and find all of them and whatever. There's a huge checklist. Totally appealing to me as an OCD guy, but it's a different style of play where achievement is measured in, did I get all the things? And so they're really kind of three very different kind of approaches to open world design.
Yeah.
There's Zelda really skews a lot closer to Metroid in the sense of requiring certain things to get to the stuff. Get to that chest that's up there above you. Well, you need to have, I don't know, the hook shot or a boomerang or the whip or whatever. You need something that you're going to get, and you can revisit places. And the really good Zelda work happens when the story or ancillary systems just push you to return to places to remember that, oh yeah, I can do that thing here now.
Yeah, the interesting thing though is, as we were talking about this a little bit too, but to jump into some specifics about the section that we played, and I'm sure we both have different stories about, because you're right, there's definitely certain ways that it pushes you to need to do certain things in certain orders. And I love your point about the mechanics of enemy design and dungeon design, requiring certain things to be part of your repertoire before you can progress. But there is, in the Zelda model of open world, and I consider Link to the Past one of those. Like we talked about getting the flippers, because if you go to the fortune teller, he actually tells you should go get the flippers.
Right.
And I had gotten stuck trying to find my way into the cave to get to the mountain dungeon, up in Hera's Tower or whatever it is, and so I thought
north of the castle and everything.
Yeah, and so I thought because of that clue from the fortune teller that I thought I needed for some reason the flippers, and so that led me. I went and got them, but then led me on this whole wild goose chase where I thought I needed to find some way to get to the mountain through the water or something. And I wasted a lot of time just trying to figure that out. And it turns out the cave that you use to get into the mountain area, it was a visual language problem.
Right.
There's some of the tile set in the artwork for some of the caves looks different than others, and I didn't see it as a way that I could actually go. It was literally just a misinterpretation of the visual language of the tiles. And I walked away. I was like, oh, I can't go this way. And so I walked away. I can't do something there. And so I literally...
You mean the big rock, basically.
Well, no, it wasn't. It's so dumb. So the way that if you're in some of the tunnels, I'm probably going to get too deep.
Oh, the narrowness.
When you get in some of the tunnels, if it's one link wide, right, and it's very narrow, and you go up, the floor looks like walls. Do you know what I mean? When you're going horizontally, the floor looks like floor. Well, actually, sometimes even horizontally looks like floor.
that took me a while too, actually.
And I kick myself afterwards. But my point is that because of that wild goose chase, I ended up going and exploring the heck out of the rest of the world.
Yeah,
I found. Did you find the ice wand, the ice staff yet?
I have it. Yes, the ice rod. Yep.
Which you don't need right now.
No, you don't. Somebody does tell you about it.
Sure, but I guess
you find it.
But it's a tool.
It's interesting. Yeah, I guess one of the things I would say, like you talk about these games not having journals and stuff. Like this is a game which rewards taking notes, which is a lost art in video games.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It is.
I sometimes take notes in modern day, but it's more like after I finish the game, I go and I look and like, what achievements don't I have yet? And I go and I make a checklist and I do it, because I'm, a trophy whore or whatever. But, I don't, as I'm going around, I expect the game's going to take care of all that stuff for me and remind me of that stuff. And here, even though there's a map, in Spirit Tracks is kind of interesting because on the DS you can draw. It's a very stylus game where you can literally go and write on all the maps in the game if you want. You just arbitrarily add a black,
which is good.
Yeah, it's great. But this is a terrific thing where it's like, oh, as I'm playing, I go, somebody will say a thing and I'll be like, do I want to do that right now? And you kind of mentioned in Breath of the Wild of having the opportunity to mark your map and just remind yourself it's a thing you want to come back to. And in these older games with not quite the system resources, you sort of want to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm just going to keep a pad of paper.
Yeah.
I'm already making notes for the podcast, so I find myself just naturally like, oh, I got to do this thing. You remember to do this thing.
Some manuals, if you remember, had notes. Pages of notes in the back you could write in, right? Like blank pages back in those days. So, I totally understand
back
that.
Before the paper costs were just too exorbitant.
Well, to your point about the ice rod, I actually I didn't know there was somebody that told you about it. So I didn't find that person, so I wouldn't have even made the note. I just happened upon that particular location because I was over exploring. But
that's interesting because I'm pretty sure somebody's like, yeah, you should really go check out the east side of that lake. I think that's where that. That's
maybe I just didn't realize that's what they were talking about.
Yeah,
do you think that's well? Maybe.
Well, I
thought
it was the next thing I had to do. For me.
Oh, yeah, no, I accidentally found it when I was looking for. But your point about the note taking, I get it. However, the reason it goes back to the original our conversation earlier on that I'll bring back in. If they hadn't stuck to their guns with that for the rest of the series, when it was possible to be, then you did have the resources to actually give you more information about your options, Breath of the Wild notwithstanding, then I would agree with you. But for some reason that I'm trying to get down to the bottom of in my head, they chose to stick to that paradigm where there is an opaque quality to how much they're going to give you. Somebody will give you a riddle about a thing or something, and they'll give you a hint, but they don't mark anything. They in Link Between Worlds, you actually can put some pins on the map, which is a nice thing, but you can't do much with the pins. They're just colors. You kind of have to remember what.
I sort of feel like this is the sort of side quest stuff. Similarly, in Final Fantasy IX, and I know you didn't go and do all that Chocobo stuff, but there was a huge kind of a very involved side quest system involving the Chocobo hunting stuff.
But
the Chocobo Dream World and all that stuff. I mean, all that stuff that you could go do entirely or fairly little supported by the game and completely unnecessary to the game.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Ice Rod is a perfect example of I don't need to have this thing.
Well, the Ice Rod is, but then we both got the flippers at this point too, but also we have no idea right now what we need them for other than fast traveling and getting to certain places that we can't get to. You know what I mean? So it's a nice secondary thing to me right now. Maybe it does come into Critical Path later, but it's a nice secondary thing that actually is a pretty big impact. And I'm just impressed with, now that I was forced, because I was stuck, to just over-explore, there's actually a lot more going on in this world than I realized, if I just tried to beeline it around. And that is a structure that they kept going in the future games. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I think the games reward that sort of returning to spaces again and again, and not in a... I think it's more like they try to add a layer of each sort of skill to each area.
Yeah, some of that Metroidness in there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a Nintendoism. I just realized that usually when I put a Zelda game down, and sometimes I come back to them, sometimes I don't. It's when I get to this point where I've lost my direction, and I know the only thing I can do. That happened to me
with Spirit Tracks is I put that thing in, and side note, Nintendo hardware is great. I had not turned on this DS in 4 years at least. And I went and I picked it up off the shelf and I flipped it on. It still had battery life for at least an hour. And I popped in the chip, and then I had to really decide, do I want to try to continue this Zelda save that I have? And I ended up blowing it away, but I just sat there for a minute ooh.
The number of times I've asked myself that question: do I want to start this in the middle again? Yeah,
because that would be a hard thing to do. I mean, that's one thing. There's a mental framework. I think that's the thing that fundamentally, Zelda games and maybe Metroid games to a degree, and definitely less so Mario games, but definitely these two franchises feel like you build up this sort of mental toolbox that you're I know I can go back to this and go back to that, and I've got I know I just added this thing, so I know there's going to be something I can do with that in a lot of different places, and I don't know what they all are, but you kind of always, these are games that feel like they're meant to be just kind of sat in and played for a solid week. And just sit down, have it in front of you,
and to really, and to sink your teeth into, and kind of fully. We talked a lot about this with Metroid, right? That sense of becoming very knowledgeable about the flow and the structure of the world, right? Because you're going to need to, once you get a new weapon or ability in that game, you're going to need to kind of recall or have a sense of where you need to return to find the next direction. And that game, man, is so intertwined. All the paths and the structure of those paths are also intertwined. It's and I think that's one thing I've always appreciated about the Zelda games is, as I have been stuck in this game, I'm able to just kind of wander the world, and yes, there's plenty of gates in my way to prevent me from going here or there, but a lot of it is semi-open, and I'm kind of at least I can see, I can't get over to that island yet. I wonder how I can do that. I can't go there, but I can go there, and they're planting all these seeds. I think I just had a notion as you were talking there to further my point about this conundrum I'm trying to figure out about how they get a pass on this. And And it's kind of happened upon a takeaway on the fly here for me and the series for this particular podcast series we're doing is there's some equation in there, that a design equation of when if you find the right let's see, how do I say this? A certain amount of hand holding combined with the right mixture of discovery makes that discovery, or lack of hand holding makes that discovery more valuable and impactful, right, and meaningful to you. So, meaning that because they have fortune tellers and random people giving you these hints that kind of point you in a direction. And then if you think, oh, I wonder what they mean by that, I'm going to go over there and kind of explore. And then when you find that thing and discover it on your own because you feel like you put two and two together, that's a way bigger, reward, as you were saying, than, oh, somebody said something to me and I got the quest and then I opened my map and they've marked it for me. And now I just have to go there and get it. Yeah. And that correlation between telegraphing an information versus discovery and how discovery goes up. But I think the trick is, and maybe this is where their magic is, that they've found the right mixture. You can go too far with lack of information.
Right.
And then make the discovery frustrating, and then people put the game down.
Yeah. I mean,
so there's some balance there.
As you were talking, I was like, there's this sort of question of the unknown, and literally finding stuff and stumbling upon stuff and things that are just kind of there just for people who are paying attention, that are not core to the experience. I mean, one of the things that is very different about having a thing pointed to on your map is that you might go to a place and stumble around and not find it in a Legend of Zelda game, and then go back to the guy and ask again.
Totally.
What were you talking about there? I mean, it's just the same line in these earlier games. No, go to the the easternmost part of the lake, and you're like, that was actually the point. Finding the ice rod for me in this game, which I haven't really used, but finding it was mostly a question of somebody saying, "Oh, you have to go to the east of Lake Hyrule, I think, or Lake Hylia or whatever, one of the two." And I actually went and looked up the manual for this game to be like, okay, what's the
what's considered
it
the
looks
lake?
What is the lake because on the eastern edge of the lake there's kind of a little inlet or something that kind of goes up, and I thought, well, is that the lake? I was literally puzzling out, what does it mean? What does it mean to be on the east side of this lake? And how far away can I go? And I know I'm supposed to be over here, but that was one of the first things I did this past play session. So it's kind of faded for me already, but it's kind of just puzzling that stuff out and stitching together those clues to understand what they're on about. It makes it more of an adventure, not knowing.
Yeah, and that's it's just such a delicate.
It is. It's a totally
balance that you can really mess up, and
you can.
They're not perfect. I think they don't always succeed.
Yeah, I think the thing is that they're very good at the things that you have to do, and I don't know. The other thing I want to sort of touch on is that this game is way more arcadey in a lot of ways than later Zelda games have been. And we haven't talked a lot about the sort of things we did this time, but we went to the desert, we got a pendant, and then we went to the Tower of Hera, and we got a pendant, we got the Master Sword, and then we fought Agahnim. And Agahnim was actually where this finally coalesced for me. I went and spent the time to get a couple of bottles filled with the red liquid or whatever so that I had plenty of health, because I thought what I needed to be able to do when I fought Agahnim was use the sort of I'm fully healthy power of the sword, which is that when I swing it, it sends out, I don't know.
Yeah. Some power thing.
Yeah, something.
Burst.
It's a projectile, basically. A magical projectile that goes kind of in the direction I swung. And actually, the whole return to the castle, that whole part is actually pretty difficult if you're not fully healthy. So I wanted to have that to fall back on. And, what I discovered was I got to the end and I was fighting that guy, and then I had run out of health things. And it turned out you could actually just, send back his own magical projectiles by just swinging the sword at the right time.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. Because I had gotten to him once, and I was and I got worked. And I'm just oh, man, I didn't have the special power, and I thought I needed it.
Well, that's an example of what I mean, though. These, when you play a Zelda game, you get into your own head about thinking you know the solution to something.
Yeah.
And you convince yourself of that. I had a similar thing with one of the other bosses. I'll have to remember which one, but you just go down this rabbit hole, you know what I mean? And then, kind of like we talked about with Day of the Tentacle and adventure games in general, sometimes you just need to walk away. And for me, at least, and I need to think about what's really going on. In that particular case, you may have missed it, but there, those tiles you can go and talk to, and the wise man, I forget his name, that talks to you sometimes and gives you hints. You know what I'm talking about? Those they look like little gray arrows that are in dungeons, and you go and talk to them, and then...
Oh, right, yeah, the sage, Saurus. Saurus something or other, yeah.
The sage will say something about the, a local area that you're in. And the one right before that boss fight, he says you can't hurt him with physical attacks or direct attacks or something. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to actually damage him. So I think that's where I got the clue in my head, at least, of I'm going to need to reflect back to him or some trick.
Yeah, see, and I just misread it. I misread it as
I need
to have this.
You can't strike him.
Exactly.
Right.
I can't just get close and whack on him.
Yeah,
I got to use this ranged attack thing I have. Yeah, it's
that's a perfect example of interpreting the riddle.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword, and when you get it, though, you feel that's going back to my point of that equation of how those two things are correlated. When you do achieve it, you feel better because you feel
smart.
I figured it out.
Yeah, you feel smart.
But until you do that, you feel dumb.
Yes,
and you might put the game down. So
it's a tough thing. I mean, back in the day, I think people spent even more. I mean, power of the dollar and whatever. I mean, games were even more expensive then. What with inflation and everything. I mean, I think people bought these games.
The time you spend,
it's going to take me forever, and I'm 12, so no big deal.
And I'm patient. Yeah. Well, some people are, but
some people.
Are there any moments in this section? Because we didn't really go into it by detail, but are there any? I'm looking at my notes for this section. There are some really delightful moments in some of the stuff that we did this time.
I think my favorite moment was what the hell? I'm a bunny rabbit.
Yeah, right. That was something else. I was and
really
I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't played Link Between Worlds, but I don't know how to talk about that game because I'm playing it at the same time, but it's very interesting how they're doing it. It's not a remake, and it's not, I don't think it's even a sequel, but it's like this, it's almost like they made a game in another dimension.
Yep.
Which I think is appropriate.
We have some email about that.
Oh, really? So, okay. Well, I'll wait then. But the bunny rabbit kind of comes in a different way in the Link Between Worlds, and I didn't know it was in this one. I had actually seen the one in Link Between Worlds before I had seen it in Link to the Past. So when that popped up, I was like, oh, there's the connection.
Well, it's a great moment because not only do you you turn into a rabbit and you have no abilities basically. You can't even, and it's kind of funny to be a rabbit because you can't even jump because it's a Legend of Zelda game. There's no jump button, so you're moving around. One thing you would say about a rabbit is it hops. So you're moving around and something that looks like an enemy, you can actually just talk to. It's like moving around. It's like a crab-looking thing. I don't remember specifically.
It's like a ball.
Yeah, I definitely felt threatened by it.
It looks like a goblin-y kind of thing, kicking a ball, but the ball's also another person.
Exactly, and you could talk to the ball, and it would tell you, you need to have. I mean, basically, it tells you, I think, what you need to have in order to be able to have all your stuff. It sort of reinforces that I actually feel like this is an area where they were worried that players were going to miss something. In the Tower of Hera or whatever, this tower at the end, the finishing the dungeon and getting the Moon Pearl, which is a separate object, those are not linked.
Yeah, I left. I couldn't figure out how to get into the big chest, and so I killed the boss, and I was like, I'll do that later. And then it dawned on me, I was like, wait a second, that's probably where the gem is. I got to go back.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing, because that's the thing you need, and it actually reinforces that at a couple of points.
Yeah, it does,
One, in talking to this NPC, but it was really unusual, and I think that was a case that was notable for me because it broke the Zelda formula of like, you have to have it to proceed. Yeah,
who does that? Like, you're leaving the dungeon, you know. I mean, it's just...
Well, I mean, you can always come back, Tim.
I know, and that's the double-edged sword. You know, that's why I have this conundrum. It's like, who does that? I say that to myself, and then I think, wait a second, that's
nobody
completely
does it
fine.
because of Zelda. Yeah,
and it should be done more often, or something like that. You know, but yeah, but the revelatory moment of when you actually figure out how to get to the door of the temple, you know what I mean? When you get on that plateau, and you switch worlds, and in this world the mountain grows or whatever, which vice versa. I mean, those are those little moments of revelation that you're like, oh man, that is some clever stuff. And
there's a lot more going on here, and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of that.
And that's overwhelming. The notion
we've had a lot of emails that have followed up. You know, the last line has been like, "Have fun in the dark world," and I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah. And there's like 7 right now. Now that we're there, they give you kind of your mission, your quest, and there's 7 places we have to go now.
Exactly. Yeah. So, all right. Speaking of 7, why don't we take a quick 7th inning stretch, and we'll come back in just a minute.
All right.
Welcome back from the break. I wanted to actually mention before we do this, one of the things I did in post-production last time is I remembered Overclocked Remix, which is a website, ocremix.com, I believe, where they remix themes. And so I was actually blending between the original sort of MIDI quality themes of the original SNES version with remixed versions that people have made later of the same themes. And so
nice.
people like that or hate it, let me know. I added a little stinger to the end of the episode to say, hey, I did this thing. But I wanted to at least throw that out there as something that I had done. And I can't now remember the names of the two particular artists that I used last time. But, I think it was in the show notes maybe last time, so go look for that if you're curious, or at least I mention it. So credit where credit is due. But OC Remix is kind of cool. You've got just tons and tons of, professional amateur composers remixing, in this case, Koji Kondo's music, to come up with kind of new versions. I kind of picked a couple that I liked, and one from the Village and one the Overworld theme, I think.
Speaking of the music in Link Between Worlds, speaking of sort of remixing, they have I think they basically took the same melodies, the same songs from Link to the Past, and just did new versions of them. The Overworld song in Link Between Worlds is amazing. I mean, it's so good.
I think, and I'm going to make a note, because I think we need to at some point talk about the music, because it is a thing.
It's like freaking Indiana Jones, right? I mean, it's
really
like our version of Indiana Jones
really
or something.
That's a good callback for sure. And I want to say we are kind of in a review drive. We're trying to get more people to review the show and give us feedback. And once we get to 75 reviews on the U.S. Apple Store, I'm going to randomly pick one to send a main prize, and a couple others to send kind of, some smaller stuff from all the reviews we've gotten to kind of just thank folks. So if you've already, written a review, you're already entered in. But if you haven't, go hit up iTunes and give us a review, and I will add that in. I'm afraid that the main prize might be too heavy for me to ship overseas, so I apologize. We'll see what the other two turn out to be. Tim doesn't even know yet what I'm sending. He'll be surprised.
Based on weight, I maybe have a guess, which
you might.
My guess is correct. I actually have one as well.
I bet you do.
I have two, actually. So,
oh my God! Well, now I don't know. Maybe
give one away. Yeah, I found some cool LucasArts paraphernalia from back in the day too.
Yeah, so we're looking to send out some stuff. You can go to iTunes and look for Dev Game Club. Type in with your thumbs a review. We're going to read a few of them for you now. First, for me, this is from ZapTurk. It's a podcast to entertain your inner gamer. He says, as a recent college graduate with a certificate in video game design, it is interesting to listen to expert developers break down old games. The interviews also help give me insight into how to think like a developer. I look forward to playing along and listening to it every week. And that's an interesting perspective. Thank you, ZapTurk. Because while we're kind of doing this as a, sort of an amateur in the sense of loving what you do kind of thing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value to like breaking down these old games and thinking about how they work, obviously. It's something we do kind of naturally when we play games. You can kind of put your game developer brain, into the fore, which probably means you enjoy the game less.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to.
It really is. Because when you're focusing on like how does this system work, it kind of takes some of the pleasure out. But yeah, I hope that I hope that some of these analyses, and discussions are helpful to people, just kind of in enriching their enjoyment, whether or not it's a profession or not.
I'd like to think we're experts, but I think it's giving us too much credit. But thank you for that.
Expert, I think, just is another word for old here.
Yeah, fair enough. We are that.
Yeah. Well, you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have the next one from Daedalus Divine.
Yes, wonderful analysis by Daedalus Divine. Ah, geez, where to start? Thanks for that opening. There are many podcasts dedicated to video game review and discussion, but none have the depth of knowledge and intricacy of analysis that Brett and Tim display in each episode of Dev Game Club. This wonderful duo know what they are talking about, and if you have ever even a modicum of interest in gaming, you will love listening to them break down the elements of the medium. Game mechanics, plotting, and design, to name a few, are filtered through years of experience and thoughtful analysis. They break down a game over several episodes, and in doing so, give each work the proper amount of scholarly study. And best of all, they're a genuinely entertaining pair whom share a love for the medium, which shines through their discussions. Positively delightful. Wow, very kind. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that is very
kind. One of the things I would say is I'm not sure that we are any more knowledgeable in terms of depth than some of the people who review games for a living, right, have played way more games than either of us will. Yeah. However, it's rare that podcasts spend more than a 20-minute segment on any one game, and I think one of the things that we try to do here is to kind of go deeper on any one game to kind of give you a sense of the rest of them, and how systems go together, or how to think about them systematically, or whatever.
And we still didn't cover everything we want to in 4 episodes.
Yeah. Your notes, you were pointing out in between in the break, that you've got all these notes of like little moments that you love and all that stuff, and it's like, well, how do we distill even that down?
Yeah, I've been thinking for some time, because it always happens to me. My notes I probably touch maybe 25% of the notes that in the discussion itself, and maybe I'll find a way to put them on the website someday, and just share them for people if they're interested. I don't know if it's useful, but
well, if you send them to me, I will make a tiny letter and I'll just like send them out as a dump. to folks afterwards. So that's something we could consider doing.
Maybe. I mean, they're kind of nonsensical too, but anyway.
I expect that from a designer. Anyway, so the next piece of feedback we had from C of Morgan is a different approach. He says, there are a lot of video game podcasts out there. If you need to know what's going on in games right now, there are so many places to go. Pick of the litter. But there's only one place where you can learn about the humble beginnings, about the way we got to where we are now, in an easy-to-digest format. Dev Game Club is like a book club for guys and gals who grew up playing the original NES and never stopped playing games. Conversations are insightful and interesting. You don't even have to have played the games to enjoy the show. And sometimes hearing the frustrations about the games will make you glad you didn't try. The interviews with gaming's pioneers in their early days always have one or two revelations that will change the way you look at the industry. And the input the hosts give about modern game development will allow you to look at some of your favorite games from the past few years in a new way. The bottom line is that this show is a unique approach to the conversation of video games that you will look forward to seeing in your feed every week. Thank you, Morgan. I assume Morgan, out of Sea of Morgan. I'm picking out a name from that ocean. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. So that's very kind.
Yes, all of these are very kind. Too kind. We're just trying to have fun. I think some of it, and just I don't know. We talk about this stuff anyway, so we figured might as well talk about it on a podcast.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I thought back to LucasArts where we had the what did we call that at LucasArts? There was the Game
Theory Club or something.
Yeah, Game Theory Club, where we kind of got together like once a month, and somebody would present a game that they've been playing, and we discuss it and things like that. That
was fun.
That was great fun, and I think about a lot of designers being in those meetings, like John File and Harley Baldwin and different people. Just like, I played this part of this game, and I have a save, and I'm going to show you this thing that you might not have played. We try to go back to the older games because they undergird so much. I mean, what we've been talking about a lot of this episode is just like the bones are there. Or like, I mean, you can't get away from them. It's that bilateral symmetry I've been talking about. Anyway, you've got the last one from iTunes this week.
Great Pod by Mr. Rintraw.
I hope Mrs. Rintraw as well.
Okay, yeah. I do not play video games, is the first sentence. I'm a busy professional with a bad game addiction in my past, so I've sworn off games to survive. That is admirable, sir. This pod has allowed me to revisit games I love at a safe distance. I describe the host as expert developers but amateur players. They make you think about the choices that go into games while engaging in a way that's inviting and accessible to those outside of the gaming community. For me, it's been like nicotine, but way better. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your choice to survive. Gaming is, there is an addiction to it, and I struggle because, especially with the podcast now, we play so much, but it's like there's the rest of life too, and it's hard to keep up.
It is. I mean, I definitely have found. I read a lot, and I would say last year I read just as much as any other given year. But this year, some of the games we've been playing, like and a Legend of Zelda game, and now making me want to play other Legend of Zelda games. I'm finding like I've got that itch.
Yeah.
I'm done with work, and I'm like, maybe I'll just spend a little time doing this thing. Plus, it's baseball season. So between my high school aged son and the Red Sox coming back on the TV, I have no time for books and movies and the other things I love. Stepping away. Like I've had games I've had to step away from. I have to put this down. World of Warcraft, perfect example of nicotine. Like,
that's it. Played this weekend.
That game's terrible. I mean, I've quit it several times. So,
Yeah, and it's a good piece of feedback because it often doesn't dawn on me that I guess I just forget we're doing a podcast that anyone can and could listen to. You don't have to be playing along, or you don't even have to be playing any games. And it's kind of nice to hear that there's people who are listening, just to kind of keep up on and kind of love games as a concept, but just maybe isn't a thing that you do day to day. So. That's good to hear.
Yep. Well, thank you, Mr. Mantra. Yep. I have the last bit. This was an email sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. And this was from RICK, spelled out in a convoluted way that I'm not going to go into. But Rick says, hey, guys, I've been a huge fan of your podcast since I began listening with the Final Fantasy episodes. Your insights on game design have opened my eyes to games in new ways. I particularly enjoy when you dive into the technical aspect of how certain events may be coded, as well as the limitations that previous generations had to overcome. That being said, I think it is a mistake for Tim to play Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds concurrently. I'm a few days behind in listening to the podcast, so I'm sure I've been beat to the punch, but the two games take place in the same Hyrule. I can only imagine this will get incredibly confusing, especially when trying to recall specific bits for the podcast.
Yeah.
So when Tim proclaimed the overworld maps were very similar in the two games, he was absolutely correct. If at this point Tim hasn't uttered an "aw geez," I'll be quite disappointed.
Yeah, I think while playing Link Between Worlds this last time, I said "aw geez" many times. Yeah, I mean, down to the first dungeon is exactly in the same place, but you get there differently. The themes and the puzzles are obviously not the same, but yeah, I'm starting to agree with him on this one. And I don't know. I haven't gotten to the other, the Dark World yet in Link Between Worlds. I assume, obviously, it's coming based on its namesake, or its title. But yeah, I'll take that advice. I'll reconsider and see how it goes. The funny thing is, it's sort of become a little bit of an experiment for me too. In this weird, I'm experimenting on myself to see, because it's a fascinating. This is a whole. I can't think of another franchise that has done a sequel, or being somebody who has been a part of reboots or sequels or carrying franchises forward. I can't think of a game franchise that has done it this way, because the games, like I said earlier, are very close, but they're not the same. It's not a remake. It doesn't seem to be to me like a remake or or a sequel. It's somewhere in between. It's this other thing that there's not a name for, where I'm like, what is this? How did,
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's one of the things that Darren and I talked about years ago. This was right at the beginning. Darren Stinnett, when I was on Starfighter, talking about, and this was at a time where it was difficult to actually go back and play older games, and if it had been on an earlier version of console hardware, for example. Emulation wasn't quite a thing yet, and I think maybe the sort of big PC emulator was already there. But in general, there was no virtual console, so this was GameCube era, N64 even era, where it's playing those older games wasn't really a possibility. And I said, you know what? I mean, we've got all this great Star Wars stuff. There's no reason not to just kind of reimagine the same material, and just come back to it, fully, for example, a fully 3D TIE fighter, with, incredible high-res models, would be fun to play, and probably reinterpreting the game systems to be a little bit more friendly to how we play games today, which is more of a controller, less a joystick, and things like that.
I just thought, as you were speaking, I just thought of two recent examples, though, that maybe, are a rebuttal to my point that this hasn't really been done in this way. I haven't played it, but the Ratchet and Clank
Oh, I have.
remake.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
isn't it like almost like playing the original game, but it's like modernized or something?
It's very similar. So,
but it's completely remade. It's not an up-res.
It's completely new. It's not it's not just a HD remake. That's actually a great example.
And then Doom was the other one I just thought of. It's like spiritually the new Doom.
Yeah, the new Doom I would say is a different thing. Than from the original game. It's so different.
Too different.
Too different to really say a reimagining. But the Ratchet and Clank, that's actually a good point. There are levels that have been completely remade, but yet are highly reminiscent of the original game.
Right. Like in your memory, you feel like you're like, oh, I
replayed all those games like a year and a half ago.
Right.
On the PS, they had a PS3 remaster, and I played them, and I bought them all for like $10 or whatever. And I was like, oh, you know what? I love these games on the PS2. I'm going to play them again. And playing the new Ratchet and Clank that was kind of a tie-in with a movie captured a lot of flavor, cut out a lot of kind of fine levels. But I mean, the biggest thing was mechanically they took all of the advancements they had made in usability,
right? Primarily.
They've
iterated on that thing.
And that they have. Yeah, that's a franchise that's more than 10 years old at this point. And they've iterated on a lot. It's probably 15 years at this point. And there's things like, it used to be that you had to go and select like some of the environmental navigation items as if they were a weapon, rather than just giving you a button of like, the triangle button or something like that. Like, oh, I can see that thing I can hook shot to give a Zelda parlance. Like, I can see that thing that I could be able to swing from, and it'll just let you press a triangle button. It'll automatically make you able to do that thing. And in the original Ratchet and Clank, you had to go and actually select the thing. And find the weapon in your inventory and, weapon, the gadget or whatever, to be able to go and do that thing. So there's like nice, like
quality of life.
Yeah, it just feels so much better because if you've been playing more recent Ratchet and Clanks, you go and run up to a ledge and you're like, oh, I'll just run and I'll jump off and I'll hit the triangle button and then you die and you're like, God damn it.
It's I think that is a close example then, because it's kind of, as I'm playing both of these, it does feel like a modernization of Link to the Past, in a way. Like, what if we could fix all these things that we, and obviously it's 3D versus 2D, and although it's kind of basically 2D, it's just it's kind of isometric top-down sort of thing. But and the other rule that I gave myself, which I forgot to mention though, so I'm going to keep trying, but I might take his advice still and decide in the end to stop. But I'm making sure that I play Link to the Past, the section that we're playing first. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then I will only play Link Between Worlds up to that point afterwards. So I've already written my notes for Link to the Past, and I'm prepped, and then I play Link Between Worlds up to, if there's a roughly equivalent moment that is the same. But I don't know. We'll see.
All right, cool. All right, well, I wanted to... I'm not going to read the emails because I had a couple of emails about a particular thing. Apparently, there's a ROM hack out there for Link to the Past, which randomizes the location of certain pickups, objects, things that you can find in the world. Yeah, this is great. I had two people write in about it. Timothy Mickelier, I'm sorry, and James R. They both wrote in about this ROM hack. I'll put a link in the show notes. But it's like, it goes and the example that they gave is, last time you remember I talked about the mushroom that I found and I gave to the witch and I got a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found finally.
Yeah, okay. So, as an example, you might dig into some chest in the final dungeon, and instead of getting that 20 rupees that you were going to get,
you find the mushroom.
You find the mushroom.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
And
random loot kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a random loot sort of thing, but there's like one table. Everything has been specifically placed in these games. Something we may want to talk about at some point. The value of randomness, but It's
that's hilarious. So it's elongating the life of this game, basically. It's like people want to go back in and be surprised again because they've probably played it like 10 times and know where everything is.
And it's just like it comes up and it's like a surprising thing. Like I thought I was going to get, whatever. I mean, odds say I'm going to get this, 20 rupee or whatever. And instead I got this thing and it was in a funny place because I was in the dark world or whatever, yada, yada, yada. So if you're interested in the ROM hack, and I thank both Timothy and James for writing in, because those things just fascinate me, like the Super Metroid 90-degree rotation hack, ROM hack that people talked about. I love this sort of people who love these games so much that they find new ways to enjoy them.
Yeah.
And like this is a sort of thing that I would never consider to do. Just like as a game developer, I haven't made a game like with a daily challenge, Spelunky. Where this random seed determines so much. I've never been a part of a game like that, and it just, like, to me, it's just a totally, a joyous kind of interesting thing to do, to just change the seed and do a different thing today.
Yeah.
And this feels like that. It's not quite as regimented as the daily challenge, but to gain more life and kind of more surprise and fun out of a game, I just find fascinating.
And this game and the Super Metroid both, I've met kind of anecdotally a few people who have already told me when they found out that we were playing these that these are games they play annually.
Wow.
They just every year they're just like it's a thing they do, and obviously they probably know the game pretty well at this point, and so you're gonna at one point hit a place where you're gonna want to mix things up for yourself. Yeah, that's great.
Well, hey man, when I'm in my retirement, I'm just going to make that a weekly thing because I'll have forgotten by the next week.
What? That's happening now. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no kidding. Oh man. Geez. All right. So let's wind things up. Thanks for the feedback. We'd love to hear your reviews on really iTunes. We'd love to have your feedback via email at devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com. For next time, we're going to finish the Ice Palace. So that's like 4 dungeons or so. I'm trying to get enough that we only have a few left to do for the final episode. I'm always surprised. I looked at Spirit Tracks recently, like just to see where I was. Like, oh, do I want to go do all this kind of side quest stuff? Or like how deep it went, and I was like, oh man, there's way more here than I thought there was. And that's another thing maybe we talk about with Zelda games is that there's layers. There's always layers of stuff.
It's an onion.
Yep. But for next time, we're going to finish up through the Ice Palace. I don't know what that means. I just looked at the walkthrough and looked at the chapter heading, but that's what we're doing next time. So if you're joining us and playing along, that's where we're going to. In the meantime, I already mentioned you can find us at devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us at devgameclub on Twitter. You can find me at Brett_Duville on Twitter, and him at
Tim Longo Jr., the JR.
And if you interact with Dev Game Club, I will be answering and explaining why Tim's dogs are named Henry and June, etc. And he'll get around to it.
Important topics like that one.
Vital, important stuff.
Yep.
But for now, that's it for us. Thanks very much, and good night.
Good night.